Thank you for coming. This is How Do I Say It? Talking with kids and teens about pornography with Deanna Lambson. A little bit of an introduction to Deanna. From the time that she was 8 years old, Deanna knew that she wanted to be a teacher, and she has been teaching ever since. She graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in education and taught 3rd, 4th, and 6th grades. As a mother of 5 boys and 1 little princess, she recognized that the community was teaching her children to say no to drugs, but not anything about internet safety. So she took the bull by the horns and decided to channel her natural ability to teach and develop White Ribbon Week, and a program that is called I've Got the Power. It was quickly adopted by the Salt Lake School District, endorsed by the Salt Lake School District and the state PTA, and published by Women for Decency. Since then, she has written additional themes for White Ribbon Week that are now taught in schools across the state. This woman has also personally changed the way that I talk to my children and has given me the confidence that I didn't get in my home growing up or from my community. And I am so grateful for what she's done to influence me and my children, and I'm confident that her presentation today will influence you as well. Please welcome Deanna Lambson.
Hi, welcome. I wanted to just start out really quickly by doing, kind of letting you know what to expect a little bit out of our workshop here today. So I am trying to get the award for being the most positive class you're going to attend today. I've attended UCAP for several years, and I know sometimes some of you may be feeling what I have felt, where there's a lot of weight, it's kind of heavy, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to know how to take it all in. But recognizing that there are many of you that carry personal heartaches, and my prayers go out to you, for you. Recognizing that, I want you to know that this presentation that I'm going to give today is intended to give you hope. It is going to be fun. It is about talking to our kids. It is about prevention. And prevention doesn't mean preventing them from ever seeing pornography. Prevention means preventing it from taking them down. So that's what I want to talk about today. And I wish that we could be in my living room and we would kick off our shoes, and I think we would have chips and salsa, because I feel like that right now. So I want you to just pretend that we're visiting with each other. I wish that I could learn from you. I am a mom of 6 children. My youngest is 10 and my oldest is 27, and I am still in this. We all are, right? So I wish I could learn from you. But I am going to be asking you some questions, and although I won't be able to hear your responses, I hope you will pull out a piece of paper and I hope you will write your responses, because hopefully that's something that you can think about as we go forward and kind of give you your own action items, your own next steps that you want to do. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to talk about talking. Okay, not just about pornography, because I don't think talking about pornography is different than talking about anything else that is perhaps a little bit sensitive or a little bit difficult. We have to talk about puberty. That's tough. We have to talk about dating. We have to talk about sex. We have to talk about media. We have to talk about marriage. We have to talk about gender. There's all kinds of topics that we have to talk about. So, why does it seem so hard? Have you ever attempted to say something and you just feel tongue-tied and you start to sweat? I know that you have probably had some experiences like I have, where maybe you make an effort to teach something or to talk about something and it didn't go quite the way you expected. Has that ever happened? Raise your hand if that's ever happened. Okay, it's happened to me too, a lot. I want to tell you a couple of examples. So I have one of my sons is 22, I think, and he just told me this last week. He said, "Mom, you know what? When you and Dad tried to talk to me about sex," he said, "I had no idea what you were talking about. No idea." And I said, "Oh my goodness, Peter, let's try it again. Let's just start over." And he said, "Don't worry about it. I talked to my friend Abby at school and she told me everything." I went, oh good, we're everything right. Not exactly what I had intended. I'll tell you a fun little story about my sister. My sister had her 9-year-old, 8-year-old son come home, and he said, "Mom, what's sex?" They hadn't really anticipated talking about that at that particular time, but she said, "You know what? He's asking questions. Let's take him out to dinner and let's visit together." So they did. They took him out to dinner. They had a good discussion. Well, the next day, 4-year-old Joey is sobbing, sitting on the floor. "Joey, what is wrong?" And he said, "Jacob told me that there's a magic word, and if you say the magic word, Mom and Dad will take you to dinner, but I can't remember the word." So I'll tell you about one recently. Now, my little kids are not here, so hopefully none of you will tell them, right? So recently I was talking to Maya. She's 10 years old, and I'm talking to her about what is sex, right? And I thought, I'm going to do this right. She's my 6th child. I've learned a few things now, right? So we went up into my bedroom. It's private. I got treats for us. We got a nice blanket. We turned on the fire. We sat by the bed. I had my books. We're all good. So as I was talking to Maya, she understood the part about how animals reproduce, about how plants reproduce. Then we got to the animals. When we got to the human part, she had slid all the way under the covers down to the bottom of the bed. I think she wasn't really excited about talking about this. So I want you to know that I have experienced, just like you have, the rolling eyes, the comment, "Can we just be done now?" The, "I think we're good." And I and that your talks have been a success. And the reason that I know that is because no matter what, when you even attempt to have a conversation with your kids, 3 really good things happen. The first one is that your child knows that you care about them. The second one is that they know when it comes to sex that things like love and respect and your faith matter to you. And the third one is they know you are approachable about anything. So there is no wasted effort. And instead of thinking about talking as being, I've got to divulge everything that I possibly know about this topic, I like to think of it as success in talking is opening up a pathway of communication. And success in talking about pornography is not judged by whether or not your kids have seen pornography. My kids have seen pornography. Your kids have seen pornography. And guess what? They all will. They're not bad kids, they are great kids. It's just the world we live in. So let's step over that right now. No embarrassment, no shame, it's just what's out there. So let's talk about it. So our success at talking with our kids is shown that in that we calmly and repeatedly open those pathways of communication. So every once in a while, I get little clues that I have done something right, even in those talks that didn't go well. And those are really precious moments. There was a day when one of my sons came up to me, a teenager, and he said, "Mom, what is sex really like?" Now, some of you might cringe at getting that question, but I was incredibly honored at getting that question. How wonderful if your kids can come to you instead of somewhere else to find out the things that, of course, they're naturally curious about. Recently, I had the opportunity to help some friends of mine. It's one of my son's friends had accessed some pornography while at our house. And so I felt responsible to talk to this boy's parents. And we went for a drive, and I shared with them what I had found, and they were devastated. They were devastated. His mom cried. His dad said, "What do we do? What do we say? We've never done this. We have no idea what to say." And if you're like me at that moment, you're praying for some sort of insight that's going to give them comfort and that's going to help, because I love this boy and they love their boy so much. And so I reminded them that their response to him was really, really important. If they responded to him with yelling or anger, he would likely never come to them again. So the best I could tell them was to just love him. love him. And this couple asked me to drop them off a block away from their home. I dropped them off, and they walked down the street, and she was crying. And to be honest, I prayed for them. Because it's a hard place to be in, and I know how that feels. The next day, my son came home from school with this particular friend, and he said, "Hey, my friend has something to tell you." When he walked in the door, I didn't wait for him to say anything. I just held out my arms to him. And he ran into my arms, and I hugged him like he was my own child. And it just all spilled out. He said, "I was so afraid after I saw those things. I went home. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just curled up in bed and cried. I was so afraid that my mom and dad would never, ever want to talk to me again. They were going to be so mad." And then he choked up and he said, "But they still love me." That was an awesome experience because those parents who knew nothing about what to say, they didn't know any statistics, they didn't know any strategies, they didn't have any of that. They felt completely unprepared, but they did something right because he felt their love and they connected. That bridge of communication and those doors to communication became open at that point. So what we want to talk about is how can we open those doors of communication? So let me move on here. Okay, really quick. I have noticed that as I look back on some of the experiences that I felt were more successful in talking with my kids about pornography, they tend to have a certain pattern. And this is the pattern. It's super simple. You tell a story, you ask questions about it, and then share your values. So let me give you an example of my very first conversation about pornography that I ever remember doing. And see if you can hear the story, the questions, and the values. So it went something like this. So Levi, I want to tell you something that happened to me when I was about 8 years old. I was walking home from school and I saw a magazine on the ground. And I picked it up. I don't know why I picked it up, but I picked it up and it had pictures of women without their clothes on. I was pretty shocked. I didn't know there were magazines like that. And I flipped through the pages and I was really shocked. And I kind of looked around to see if anybody was looking at me. And I looked at a couple more pages, and then I threw it back down on the ground. So Levi, do you think it was bad that I looked at that magazine? Like, do you think I was a bad person because I looked at that? Like, I didn't go home and tell my mom and dad that I had seen it. Why do you think I didn't tell my mom and dad that I saw it? Well, you know, Levi, now that I've grown up, I've realized that I wasn't bad, and it wasn't my fault, even though I picked it up and looked at it, because it's normal to be curious about things. Sometimes we see things that are bad, but that doesn't make us bad. From then on, I decided I didn't want to look at people that way that I saw in that magazine. Have you ever seen anything that made you worried or made you feel like you might get in trouble? Did you hear the story, the questions, and the values there? Let me give you one more example. Okay. Hey, Maya, I have a very funny story to tell you about when I was in 3rd grade. I was standing in the lunch line at school, and they were serving spaghetti with an ice cream scoop. Do they do that at your school? And right there in the lunch line, my friend Laurie, and I don't know if Laurie's here, my friend Laurie said, "Hey, I know how babies are made." And I said, "Really?" Because I had no clue. And she said, "Yes. What happens is the daddy hugs the mommy so tight and a little teeny baby pops out of his tummy and goes right through her skin into her tummy." I said, "Really?" Like, I don't think so. I don't think so. And she said, "Yes, it is." And so Maya, do you think Laurie was right? I didn't believe her either. Can you believe everything that your friends or movies or anybody else says about sex? Maya, you are grown up enough to understand something very special and very sacred. So let's sit down together and let's talk about God's miraculous and beautiful way of making families and how you came into our family as a baby. When I found out that I was pregnant with you, Daddy and I were so happy, and I want to tell you how it happens. I will always tell you the truth, and you can ask me about anything. Some things are so special and so private that we don't talk about them with our friends, but you can always talk to me. So, doesn't it seem like a conversation like that would be really easy to have? So much easier than saying, sit down, I have a list of 5 things that are on my list I need to talk to you about, right? So why does it help to start with a story? I think it sidesteps the awkwardness. You just step right into something. It lets them know that I have been where they are. She needs to know that I have faced this situation too and made a decision. I think it also makes it safe for them to share. I'll have to tell you, when I have shared experiences, whether it's about child sex abuse, experiences that made me uncomfortable, whatever it is, if I share a story about me, all of a sudden my kids will say, well, there was that one time, I'll tell you about this. And they open up because they realize that I am now a safe person to talk to. Why ask a question? It invites a conversation instead of a lecture. It helps them become engaged. And even if they don't give the answer that you're hoping for or that you hope they get from it, it allows them to process things. It gives them a chance to think it through. And why do they need values? I think you already all know that, but kids are getting a lot of information from all sorts of places about a lot of stuff they don't need to know, and they're not getting the stuff they do need to know. They know about anatomy, they know about sex positions, and they know about birth control. But what they're not getting is how to feel about their body, how to handle the feelings that they have, the relationships that they have, how to interpret sex scenes that they see on TV. So share your values in whatever you're teaching, even if it's one sentence. Share your values. And I have to say, whatever your faith is, share it. Hold on to it and share it. I can promise you that there has not been a single conversation about sexuality or about pornography that has not involved my faith. So I want you to think for just a minute about what conversation door you would like to open up. So if you have a piece of paper, think about this. Perhaps you have a child that's 3 or 17 or 33, it doesn't matter. Is there a conversation that you have been thinking you'd like to address with them? If so, write it down on your paper. Now take just a minute and ask yourself, did a parent ever talk to you about this particular issue? Or did you have an experience? Maybe it was when you were a child, or maybe it was last week. Anything with a neighbor, a schoolmate, something you saw on the news? What story could you use to help introduce this issue with your child? If an idea comes to mind, write it down on your paper. Now, of course, once you tell that story, then you follow up and you ask some questions and you talk and listen to what they say. Perhaps you will find that they say something you weren't expecting. Your conversation might go a direction that you didn't anticipate. Follow it. If they're willing to talk to you, follow it. Now, I've found that most often I don't have to think of a story because the story is plopped right in front of me. That happens to us all the time. Just a few days ago, I was picking up my son from high school. He's in 9th grade, and 5 of his friends. And I noticed a girl walking on the grass, and she had a super short skirt on. It was this flouncy thing, really short. I didn't know if it was going to cover her derriere. So I said, in kind of a funny way, I said to the boys, you know what? When that girl woke up this morning, she looked in the mirror and she thought, I look pretty great. And we chuckled about that, and the boys said, well, it's a boy. And I said, what? They said, that's a boy. It's not a girl. I went, oh. Well, there we go. There's a story plopped right in front of me that we can have a conversation about, right? Okay. Just recently, my little daughter has become fascinated by that movie, Dr. Quinn, the Medicine Woman, the pioneer one. Really fun, right? So she's watching these videos, which she really enjoys. Well, I've noticed just watching over her shoulder, the last several episodes have been about a woman who's a prostitute, and her pimp is angry at her because she wants to get married to this nice guy and she's not going to be there earning money, and the mother-in-law's mad at her. And I went, oh my goodness, I here's a story. Let's talk about it. I hadn't really anticipated talking to Maya about prostitution, but why not? There it is. She'll understand it. So on the way to school just this week, our conversation on the way to school was, hey, Maya, do you remember in the movie how the mother-in-law was mad that why do you think that is? What do you think she's doing? Why would anyone want to let their body be used by someone who didn't love them? Do you think she wants to do that? And we had a great 20-minute conversation on the way to school about prostitution. There you go. Not what I was expecting. So, I have a few tips for talking, regardless of what it's about, and I'll just go through these quickly. Of course, we can teach our families when they're all together. We can have family meetings. We can talk about it in the car with lots of people, but if you really want to talk and listen and really know how they feel, it's got to be one-on-one. I remember the unfortunate evening when I was in the conversation where my parents were talking to my brother about sex. And I remember my mother drawing anatomy on a piece of paper, and my brother was mortified that I was there. And he said, does she have to be here? Can she leave? Which is the same thing I was saying, right? So it needs to be one-on-one. The second is it should be quick. It doesn't need to be an hour long, and you don't need to teach everything. Just one thing, just one principle, one truth. Keep it positive. If there is an experience or something you've seen that you want to share, you keep it general. They don't need to know details. They don't need to think about anything graphic. I don't need to put that in their minds. I can just present the idea. The fourth one, we've talked about asking multiple questions, following up with open-ended questions. And number 5 is the most important one. Talk to your kids about these things when you feel nothing but love. No blame, no anger, no resentfulness, no hurt, no embarrassment. And if that means that you have to wait a little bit, then wait a little bit. In talking to a dear friend of mine, Dr. Steve Smith, who's the director of the counseling, all of the BYU counseling at BYU, he said embarrassment is one of those things that really keeps parents from talking to their kids. He said we're afraid of it for some reason. We're afraid to use the words. We're afraid to talk about it. He said don't be afraid of it. And imagine yourself being comfortable using words. Can you say words like intercourse? Can you say words like masturbation? Whatever those words are, not fun to say, but you know what? I need to be able to say them without being embarrassed, without turning away, because if your kids sense that there's something, a topic that makes you uncomfortable, they will quickly identify it and not go there. So if you need to, go into your closet and practice saying some of these sentences using those respectful and appropriate terms. That would be a very funny thing, not a fun thing, a funny thing to walk in on and find someone doing that. But we need to get comfortable with it. Now, I want to go to a serious question. All right, what do I say if I find that my child has seen pornography? And I'm not talking here about an accidental pop-up or finding a magazine on the ground. I'm talking about when you find out that your child has gone looking for it. I want you to know that I know how that feels. As you check the history on your computer and you see one image that led to another, and your heart sinks, and you feel dark, and you feel hopeless, and you think, have I lost them? And you think, oh no, it's over. And you want to cry, and you want to yell at them, and you want to grab the computer and throw it out your window, and you want it to smash. I know how that feels. So maybe some of you feel that way right now. Maybe that's why you're here. If so, you are not alone. And I just want to ask you to close your eyes for a minute and imagine that child and fill your heart with love for that child. Just breathe and feel the love that you have for that child. Love will accomplish more than any punishment. Love will do better than any lecture. Hold on to that love that you feel. I remember one time in particular where we checked our history and I saw a number of pornographic sites, and I had all those feelings that we just talked about. And my husband and I waited for a quiet moment. I'm glad we did that. We didn't know what we were doing. We were young, inexperienced, but we waited for a time when we could be together and to be alone with our son. And do you know the first thing we did? The first thing we did is we both hugged him. And then we knelt down together and we prayed. To be honest, I didn't have any solutions for him. I didn't know what to say. I don't even remember what we said. And if you were to ask him today, I think he would tell you that he doesn't remember what we said. But there's one thing I remember really, really clearly, and it was the feeling that enveloped us at that moment. It was literally like a warm blanket had been wrapped around the three of us, and we talked. Somehow I remember at that moment feeling like it's not the end of the world. This is not the dark abyss that I thought it was going to be. And in a strange sort of way, I even thought to myself, you know what? Maybe it's good that now he understands the enemy that he needs to guard himself against, because before he didn't know, and now he knows. Is it possible that this experience that I thought was going to be so horrific and so awful turned out to be a sweet experience? Imagine that. Let me share with you an example that another friend shared with me, a good, bad example, and I will share this in his words. My sister-in-law called and asked my wife and me to come to their home. We have something to show you from when our 16-year-old son and theirs had been playing together. They had not only seen a lot of pornographic images, but also had a lot of vile and horrible discussion sites online. It was so awful. I told my wife, we have got to do something about it right this very minute. I want to get him out of school. So we did. We drove right to the school and we checked him out. We drove home silently. He knew something was really wrong. I was not yelling, but I was extremely stern. In hindsight, I wish that I had stopped to think about this son. His worst emotion is being embarrassed. Something needed to be talked about, certainly, but did I need to embarrass him? How does he explain to his friends why he was taken out of school? What would have been better would have for us to wait for 24 hours, to stay calm, to hug him, to sit down and say, tell me a little bit of what you're feeling. This experience distanced us for a long time. My son did stay away from pornography, but it has taken us years and years to rebuild a relationship. I wish I could go back and just love him. As I said before, love is better than any punishment, and love is better than any lecture, and love will accomplish what nothing else can do. So, now, before we run out of time, I know some of you came here wanting some concrete examples of what and how am I going to teach my children. So I'm going to share with you some fun things that I love. This is something that I teach all the time to my kids, anyone I know, and also in our White Ribbon Week at school, we teach it to every school child. You can teach it to a 3-year-old. It's called tic-tac-toe, okay? Tic-tac-toe because each of them starts with a T. And when you do 3 in a row, it really helps. Turn it off, talk to a parent, and turn to something active. If you take all the science and the information that you get from the industry about how to prevent pornography addictions, that's it in a nutshell. Turn it off, talk to a parent, turn to something active. Everyone can remember that. And this is even helpful for my older kids and for me. Turn it off. Talk to somebody about it. Turn to something active that turns your mind to something positive. So here's another one. The second one that you can go home and teach today is called the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule is something like this. Hey, let me just read this here. Ethan, today at our conference, I learned that when a child or even adults see pornography, it can stay in their mind and worry them. But telling an adult is the best way to get that bad feeling to go away. So let's decide to have a 10-minute rule in our family. That means if we see something that is pornographic or violent or awful or shocking, we tell each other right away within 10 minutes, and we will never be in trouble. That will help us to let it go. Will you do that with me? Now, some people say that this will never work. They say, yeah, right. Your 18-year-old is going to say, Mom, I just went looking. But let me tell you, I have 6 children. I didn't start teaching this until my younger 2 children. But my 15-year-old is the poster child for the 10-minute rule. So there's often where, one time he said, his name's Noah, and he said, Mom, can I tell you something? Come and sit with me on the stairs. So we went on the stairs, and he told me about something offensive that he had seen. And I said, Noah, thanks for sharing that with me. And he said, phew, I'm so glad I did. Now it's your problem. And he went out and ran out to play. That's exactly what we want to have happen, right? It's so great. So another time, I woke up in the morning. This is just a week or 2 ago, and Noah is 15 now. So I wake up in the morning, I open the door to my bedroom, and he was sleeping right outside the door. And I said, Noah, what are you doing here? And he said, I saw something awful last night, and I didn't want to wake you, but I wanted to remember to tell you the second you woke up. When they realize that they're not going to be in trouble, that you've opened that door to communication, they have someone to talk to. And we all know that secrecy is the lifeblood of addiction. So when they can talk to you, what a gift you're giving your children when they can talk to you. I've tried to model the 10-minute rule in our family. So at the dinner table, I sat down and I said, hey, I need to tell you guys, I was looking at wedding pictures on Facebook, and sure enough, it ended up that these couples had no clothes on. So I just thought I better tell you. And Noah said, good job, Mom, you followed the 10-minute rule. Now, the thing I like about this is that I'm going to do a little example here. So I would love to do this have you do this with your kids. You see something that is upsetting to you, and when you tell someone, it allows you to let it go. Now, I wish this were an open sky, because if it were an open sky, we would see that balloon go up and up and up, and pretty soon it would get so small and it would just disappear from sight. If we teach our kids that by sharing the things that they see, the feelings that they have about it, the worries that they have, it allows them to let it go, and it becomes smaller and smaller until it's out of sight. Okay, let me share with you, of course, there are some awesome resources that you will find as you go out to the booths. Please check them out. Such wonderful ways you can talk to your kids, young and old. I'm going to share with you one that I particularly love. And this is a form that was given out to us at this UCAP convention several years ago, and I have saved it. The tic-tac-toe and the 10-minute rule are awesome to present to younger kids, and to have that be something that you do as part of your ongoing conversations at home. What about older kids? This paper right here compares the difference between porn-related sex and healthy sex. I found this fascinating and hugely helpful. And my husband and I, after a UCAP conference a couple of years ago, actually decided we were just going to be parents. We were going to talk to them about it. And one by one, we invited the kids to come downstairs, and we looked at this paper, and we talked about a number of other things too. But it was so great to help to go through this together and say, can you see how different porn-related sex is than healthy sex? And I would never want you to confuse the two. I think sometimes when we don't talk to our kids about healthy sex, they see what they think that what they see on the internet is healthy and good, and that that's the way people treat each other. So absolutely wonderful resource. And Vanna Davis told me that she had ordered one of these sheets for every one of you. So before you leave the conference, I think she was going to have someone at the back of the room giving it to you. Before you leave the conference, if you don't get, do we have them? Okay, so be sure and pick one up, because honestly, it's just a really great thing to be honest and discuss with your kids. Now, I want to just tell you a little bit about what I do. I am a mom. I'm a parent, just like you are. I love my kids like you love your kids. And I wanted to do something to help all of those kids who are in a really sex-saturated world and completely immersed in media that for the most part is devastating to their spiritual, emotional, physical health. So we decided to prepare White Ribbon Weeks. Now, White Ribbon Week is just like a Red Ribbon Week. It's a week-long set of lesson plans and activities that help you learn about a certain topic. So Red Ribbon Week is against drugs, and White Ribbon Week is internet safety. Okay? So we developed 4 different programs. We wanted it to be positive. We didn't want to have anything that was scary or frightening. And I think part of the reason why this is not included in our current curriculum is because people don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to use appropriate terms. They don't know how to separate it from sex education. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. So each of these programs allows us to go in. We teach them certain principles. And every one of these programs has something fun that they do. They earn their media detective mustache, or they get to attend the brain boosting center during lunchtime. And all of the principles that they learn become a password for them to participate in lunchtime activities. So the awesome thing about White Ribbon Week is just with a few volunteers, we had the opportunity to talk to every child in the whole school every day about whatever the topic was for that day. Now, you might be thinking, great, I want to get her to come in and do a White Ribbon Week at my school. But you know what? The world is not going to change by me doing every school or by Fight the New Drug doing every school. It's going to happen by you doing your school. I love what Elder Holland said, where he said, you can survey a large field, but you have to cultivate a small one. Wasn't that great? That's what we need to do. So, let me just share with you this analogy, and this also comes from Dr. Smith at the BYU Counseling Center. If you were to take this picture right here, that wave is overwhelming. It's absolutely, I don't know if I would survive that. And sometimes when we're looking at the plague of pornography, we become just overwhelmed. It is this wave that is unstoppable. And if any of you have ever stood in the ocean when a huge wave comes and you say, I am not going to fall over, I am going to stand my ground, right? I'm going to stand here, I am not going to be pushed over. And within an instant, you are tumbling in that sand, completely out of control, right? But instead, if you say, I'm not going to fight that wave, I'm going to go right underneath it. I'm going to go right underneath it. Isn't that an amazing feeling? And you come out on the other side, and you're smiling and you're safe. We didn't stop the wave. We didn't get rid of the ocean. We didn't stop the threat, but we learned how to navigate through it. I want to tell you that I have a vision of what can happen. If we can talk to our children, if we can give them the skills to not fight it this way, but to go under the wave and to come up on the other side, I have a vision that that is how we're going to overcome this trial. We are going to strengthen resilient children. And if that happens, I hope that governments make good choices. I hope that the pornographers go out of business. I hope all those things. But you know what? Regardless, if we can build resilient children, they'll be able to navigate through this. Sure, they're going to see it, but it doesn't have to take them down. Can I ask you today to do just a couple of things? To, first of all, determine that you're going to have a conversation with your child. This convention that you're attending today is one of the greatest stories that you can tell. You can say, hey, I went to this class and they told this story about this, or I learned this, or I saw this. Ask some questions, get the conversation going. more than anything, let them know that you are approachable. You don't have to teach them everything you learned here today. Just open the door. Because when you open the door, you can have all those ongoing conversations that we know are so important. So open that door. The second thing I'm going to ask you to do is to stop by our booth, get a booklet, and determine within yourself, are you willing to organize this at your school? It is super easy. Everything is spelled out in the booklet. It's a week in a bag. It's all in there. The letter to send home to parents, the handouts you're going to do, the morning messages, your lunchtime activities, everything's in there. All it needs is you. All it needs is for you to do it. Can you imagine if each one of us said, I will do this for my child's school? Can you imagine how many thousands of children would be protected? How many thousands of them would have some skills that they didn't have before they came? If for some reason you feel like there's no way, I just can't do that, I don't have the time, will you take it to your principal? Take it to your principal. Tell him that in our state, it is required by law that we teach, tell him or her principal, that it is required by law that we teach some sort of digital citizenship in every school, and that there are funds given to their school community council to pay for it. Tell them that. They know it, but just remind them. Tell them also that pornography was just declared a public health crisis by our Utah State Legislature. Another thing you can tell him or her is that this program that you want to bring to their school never once mentions the word pornography. It doesn't have to. We never once have to use that word in the school because we don't want to cause any sort of concern with parents that we're teaching anything that we don't want their kids to know. We don't use the word pornography, but I guarantee you those kids know what to do when they see it. They absolutely learn what to do. So will you do those two things? Will you make a personal commitment to make a difference in your local school? And secondly, will you make a commitment to open those doors of communication? That is how we're going to overcome this. We can do a lot of good right here. And I pray for all of you. I'm grateful so much for your concern about it, the fact that you're here. I heard something somewhere that I absolutely believe and I repeat all the time, and that is every time you learn something new, your child is immediately safer. And I believe that. So thank you for being here today. I think we have a couple minutes that I could answer some questions if anyone wants to ask something. So, yes.
So you mentioned tell a story, but in your case, you know, a lot of people hear ads, right? So if I've got a son who I want to tell a story about, I probably didn't handle it the best way when I was a kid, right? So the story that I would tell him, I mean, is it good to tell a story even though, as a child you didn't manage it the best way you should have?
Okay, for those of you who didn't hear his question, that's a really good question. And I'm sure a lot of you out here would have really great responses for him. I will do my best. He's saying, what if you have struggled with an addiction yourself, and perhaps when you were young you didn't handle it the way you hoped? How do you tell that to your kids? I think that exactly is powerful, what you just said. I think sometimes we're worried that if we talk to our kids, we're going to steal their innocence, or that we're going to introduce them to something they don't already know. I think you need to trust your father heart and trust your mother heart that when you are honest and open with them, it will build pathways of communication that will be awesome. So something that you're afraid of might be a really powerful bonding experience. If you share with them, not any details about what you've seen, but just maybe the first experience, or maybe what took you back to it, and what you've learned, and what you wish you had known, and that you love them so much that you wanted them to hear that. Yeah, you bet. Is there another question? Yes.
The tools and advice that you've given, do you change them when talking to grandparents? When talking to grandparents, are your tools and advice any different?
So you're saying, would I as a grandparent teach these same things to my kids? Or to my grandkids, is that what you're asking?
That's right.
That's a super good question. I'm not a grandparent yet, so I haven't personally experienced that, but many of you I'm sure have. I think it's another one of those things where you need to trust your heart. I think it would be really good to have a conversation with your children and say, you know what, I've been learning some things about media, about keeping kids safe, about opening conversations. I just want you to know that I feel like this is something I want to do with grandchildren, and reassure them. We don't have to talk about anything graphic. We don't have to talk about anything scary, but we can reassure them because they are in the middle of a very graphic and scary world. So it's kind of like throwing them in the ocean and saying, is it okay if I teach them how to swim? So I would just have a quick conversation with your children and say, and you know what, if you are in the moment and you feel like there's something that you can give to your grandkids that will help them, I would do it.
Thank you.
That's my thoughts. Is this a question? Or is my time up? Okay.
Good question. Recently my son has started to ask questions about things he's heard in school that's vulgar language, vulgarity. And I don't know if I want to tell him what it means. So how do I talk to him and still be open without?
Okay. I'm not sure if everybody heard that question, but if you have a child that comes home maybe discussing vulgar language or situations that occurred at school and you feel uncomfortable about telling them what it means, you guys have really good questions. Well, I'll give you one quick example. My son came home one day and we're sitting at the kitchen counter and he said, Mom, it's because of that 10-minute rule thing, right? He came home and he said, I'm really troubled because somebody at school was telling these jokes about this girl at school. And he told me what the jokes were, and they were vulgar. And so first thing is you just take a deep breath, which I really believe in. Like before you say anything, just take a deep breath because it just helps you calm. It helps you think a little bit before you respond. It helps remove some of that feeling of embarrassment or things like that. So we talked about it. I think it's okay to tell them what the word means in honest, mature terms. I had a son write a word in a yearbook over and over that he didn't know what the word meant, and they suspended him from school. And he didn't know what it meant. And when the principal asked him, do you know what that word means? He didn't want to be embarrassed, so he said yes. So they suspended him. So this poor child. So we had to talk about it. But I think you just have to find a calm, non-emotional way. And you know what? Deanna Alexander has a book. She has a booth out here. It's called Educate, Empower Kids. She has some books that are called 30 Days of Sex Talks for different age groups, up to 8, 8 to 11, and 12 and up. And they have a glossary of terms that are fabulous. It's a very non-emotional, straightforward way to say this is what it means. When I had the conversation with my daughter about prostitution, in the movie, they didn't use the word prostitute. They used the word whore. And they yell it out, right? So I had to explain that to her. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of ugly words for these. This is an ugly word that you might hear. We don't use that word, but I want you to know what it is in case you hear it at school. I think you just have to be honest. They're going to hear it. Yeah. Tell them what it means and tell them how you feel about it. And give them other words that they can use. Always use the respectful, appropriate, mature words for things.
We can take one last question.
The name of the author, the group that publishes it is Educate, Empower Kids, and they have a great website for parents. So please check that out. They have a booth out here, and the books that you're looking for, she's going to love that I plugged all this. There are 3 green books. She's got one right there you can kind of hold up. As a matter of fact, if I go backwards, you can see it in my slide. Do you see on the left there, 30 Days of Sex Talks? It's really great, really, really great. Yes, right here.
Yeah, so I just have a comment, like with this gentleman's question. So I kind of
Last question.
I had that similar experience with my father, and with this first question about, how to tell an experience that they may have had when they were younger, but how to present it. And so when we had the talk, like I felt like, like it's about time, and, instead of holding everything in and trying to avoid things, like he was just open and just told me, whereas, the first experience that I had with my parents, it was not a bright experience for me. It was very traumatic, and it caused me a lot of heartache for a long time. And I, for the first time, got the sense of, I don't have to be a superhuman because my parents don't talk about anything and they just pretend like everything's perfect, and
Yeah.
they carry this facade that I feel like a lot of people in the culture of Utah, like they just pretend like, oh yeah, everything's just good.
That if we don't talk about it, it's not happening or it doesn't exist, right?
So
Yeah.
it released a lot of, pressure of like, I don't have to be perfect. I don't need to be superhuman.
And I think the relationship you build between parents and children is more important than any lecture that I could give or any new scientific thing that I could teach my kids. That relationship is the thing I'm trying to preserve. It's interesting when you talked about, too, how you felt like it's about time we talked about this. I think it's important for our kids to know that we struggle with this, too. It's not like as soon as you get married, somehow the temptation or the attraction or the lure of pornography disappears. That's an important conversation to have when you have kids getting married. With our kids, we have monitoring software that we've put on all of our computers. Interestingly enough, my kids installed it. They're technology savvy and I'm not, so they installed it because we all need help. It's not us against our kids, it's our family against the outside. And so the rules that we set for them are the rules that we set for ourselves. And I ask for their help for us too. So I think the more we can give the idea and the reassurance that we're doing this together, and maybe being honest and open with our kids about the struggles that we have, helps them to realize, we can do this together. We can support each other through this, and they'll be more open to coming to you when they have struggles. So I hope that's been helpful. Thank you so much for being here today, and hope you have a wonderful day at the conference. Thank you.